It's an honor to be here tonight, alhamdulillah. And I do know that as Muslims, especially as Muslims, we're living in a society where the modern society, where science and the exposure of newer methodologies is a very prevalent part of our lives. And it's a wonderful thing. The fact that the tools of science have reached the level that they have today, at the level that we are able to even correlate, validate, and falsify any false notions in science, I think that's fantastic. It's really very encouraging. But I'd like us to understand that we have to understand what the definition of science is and how different is that with relations to how we see religion. Are these two irreconcilable entities? Are they two separate universes that cannot be reconciled? Is one under the other? What is it? So, because once you understand these definitions, once you understand the functions of these definitions, and once you understand the limitations of science, and once you understand where religion comes into play, the necessity of religion, what is the definition of religion? What is religion? When someone says, are you religious? Or do you have religion? Or do you follow a religion? Or when people say, I'm against religion, what do they mean by that? Okay, so it's extremely important. My suggestion to us all, if we want to strengthen our iman, there is a methodology by which you and I must follow in order to correlate conversations so we don't go into cyclical, argumentative sessions. So first and foremost, define your terms. Even when you're talking to someone, ask them, what do you mean by this? What is your definition of this word? Can you please define it? Can you explain it to me further? If a person is articulate enough to be able to give you good definitions, though you and I may reject those definitions, it's a good starting point because now you can adapt according to that definition answers. It's almost like a logical pathway, where a logical pathway requires a precondition which is called an assumption. Without assumptions, you cannot have logical pathways as a methodology. And once you have a fixed system, the logical mechanical system simply demands the variables to come in, and it will process and give you the number, just like in a function, mathematical function. There's a logical pathway, but what you feed into it can vary. The same with logical discussions about religion and God. It's got a pathway, and what you feed in it is going to give you a result. Many a times, people who discuss religion, who discuss God, who discuss methodologies, don't have an understanding of this logical methodology. They have not validated the equation. They have not validated the logical system. They have assumed it is legit. They have assumed it is right. And therefore, they start pumping the variables into it, which then starts giving them odd answers, which then leads them to make odd conclusions, which then leads them to make conclusions that in principle, if there was the truth of that issue, they would be astray. And it makes you wonder, how come I came across this wrong answer? Well, it's because you didn't process it properly. So please understand, brothers and sisters, in these conversations, as Muslims, even as non-Muslims, we must be very methodical in our method of approaching the truth. I don't care if it's about God and no God. It's about within Islam, between the schools of thought, that which of the 5 major schools of thought is correct. Between Christians and Muslims, between Jews and Muslims, between Buddhists and Muslims, which one is right? How do I know which religion is right? I went through that phase, as I mentioned in my lectures a few nights ago, when I deconstructed my religion, because I was doubtful. I was not sure if Islam is the right religion. I needed validations. And I felt it's my responsibility and duty to understand it in my heart, because I don't want anybody preaching religion to me. I'm not interested. I do not want to be fooled, and I don't want anybody giving me fairy tales to scare me because I'm afraid of going to hell. I don't care. I want certainty, whatever it is. If you're going to tell me that's the way it is, and that's the name, and that's the brand, and I'm convinced that's the truth, then that's what I have to be. It's as simple as that. That's what I loved about science. When I went into science, I loved science because of its methodical approach to things. It was what we call emotive. There was no emotion involved in it. It was very methodical at the fundamental level. What makes religion so powerful, it has that component of emotions. It's got the component of faith. It's got the component of tawakkul, which science doesn't have. And as human beings, we can never be purist in methodical systems. Unless you lower yourself down to a robotic level, you're not a human being anymore. Emotions are an extremely powerful method of bonding and making things clearer. It's amazing when you love someone and one tear comes out of your eye when you're traveling. That's louder than all the words you can say to a person about how much you love them. That one tear, because it says too much, right? That's an emotional state. Science cannot grapple that. But let me explain very briefly that there is a methodology, and I demanded that for myself because I did not want to be fooled. And I wanted to make sure that I was as unbiased as possible in my approach. So when people say to you, look, when you do scientific analysis and methodical analysis, you need to be as non-biased as possible. I used to believe that yes, there is a way in which one can be totally non-biased. I came to the conclusion later on in my life that it's impossible to avoid a bias. It's impossible. Nobody can be free from a bias. It's impossible. So let's not fool ourselves in that. But we do try to limit the biases and control it so that at least our judgment is not skewed because of our biases. I hope I'm making sense now. Okay? So in that process, I started to question the integrity of my belief from God onwards because I knew fundamentally that all ideologies come from a central root. Just like when I study a cell, I'm always working at the nuclear level. As a person studying molecular science, what fascinated me about recombinant DNA was DNA is the root of life. It's the only molecule known to man that can replicate itself, and it's the template that decides how I'm going to be as a living being. And I love that. I say, I want to know this. I may not practice molecular science, but I want to know because my curiosity is there, because the incredible hand of God is working at that level where you have DNA polymerase replicating a copy, you see, making a copy of the original strand. This double helix system was fascinating to me, that how Allah in His infinite mercy has, contracted this very, very intricate, complicated formula and then completely contracted it into a very, very tight coil. And it's so functional, it's so elegant, and it's so secure, and it's so rapid. I said, wow, what is this? So as I'm studying science, every day I would come out and says, is it possible this can happen by chance? What is the probability? I'd ask the mathematicians. I'd go to math, my math professors, what's the probability? Tell me, crunch some numbers for me, please. How is that possible? There's too much order. I'm seeing way too much structure. That me, after spending, years studying this, and I'm watching it in the microscope, and you're seeing this thing happening in a millisecond. So that's it? That's all these years I studied? It's right there? Says, yeah, that's it. And I'm supposed to be a smart guy? All I did was I looked at it, and I broke it down, and I can tell you, and I can predict. Wow, what is this methodology? To me, it's intriguing. But still, the point is going to the nucleus level. Any conversation, always find the nucleus. If you ever study atomic science, nuclear science, you'll see it's all at the atomic level. You find subatomic level, quarks, whatever you go. Even if you go into quantum physics, you'll see there's always a center which spreads out and expresses itself. There's always a center to everything. Even the universe, if you study it, you'll see that the galaxies are moving around circles in disk shapes, and there's always a center. Allah says, إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِقَوْمٍ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. These are signs for a community that thinks. So the more I got into it, the more I realized there is that core. So in my belief system, what is my core? I said, my core is a deity, because my origination has to have a precursor. And that precursor that made me in the universe must be at the center for causing who I am. Who is this one? Do you exist? Are you there? How come I can't see you? And how come you don't show yourself? And why are you so great that I can't see you? Couldn't you be great and I could see you? So these were questions I always asked myself, all the time. And the more I delved into it in a methodical way, I began to realize, wow, what a foolish question to see God. That I have seen God enough by looking at His creation. Now you might say, oh, that's a leap of faith. No, it's not. Because in my scientific world, I remember we used to come up with all kinds of conjectural arguments. Let's, for example, to give you a quick analysis. You see, for example, people like Stephen Hawking, who's written a book called Brief History of Time. And he's written many books, by the way. He's even done a whole series called The Elegant Universe. Where when you study, he talks, in fact, he was one of the proponents who suggested the idea of black holes. And when they study the density of the universe, they notice that the universe is far denser than what was visible. And they could not reconcile mathematically that huge discrepancy in the numbers with regards to the density of the universe compared to what was visibly immeasurable. And they knew there was some kind of dark matter out there that could not be visibly seen and that light could not penetrate it. And they called it the dark hole, the black hole they call it, which light cannot penetrate through. And it's infinitely dense, they call it infinitely hot. And they called it a singularity. A singularity is that point of origination where mass is so dense, it's the ultimate, basically. So the more I studied this, the more I realized, I said, Hawking has reached this conclusion without seeing this dark matter. Is that acceptable in science? Because if science is so tangible and everything is measurable, can I measure something by negating something? Can I conclude the existence of something by rejecting something? In other words, can I derive scientific understanding without having to tangibly see something, but I see the effect of that thing that's hidden through that which is seen? Can I do that? And I said, we do. In fact, if you study string theories, in string theories, you have this 11th dimension, 12th dimension. Michio Kaku, for example, is a Japanese physicist. There are many out there who talk about string theories and superstring theories. They're talking about dimensions that no science in the world today can experiment. It cannot be experimented. It can be derived indirectly, and we can try to see the effects, just like we cannot see electrons around a proton. We can't see it, but we know it's there. So we're deriving so many things that I started to understand. I said, wow, even in the world of science, if I really want to get up into the purest of the forms of sciences, it's all derivations. It's all with a clear understanding that once I see the foundations, I can now talk about entities that you can never tangibly touch, but that are so real in my life, they're just as real as the tangible. And the more I went into that, the more I came to the conclusion, that's science. He says, yes. I said, then why am I rejected into believing about a deity that I cannot measure? For I can derive it. Even Richard Carrier called me, he says, Rajabali believes in evidential presuppositionalism. It's a heavy word. Rajabali believes in evidential presuppositionalism. I chuckled, I said, Richard, that's what science is all about. It is evidential presuppositionalism. We're scientists, that's what it's all about. I see and therefore I presuppose. Hello, you're just putting some fancy words around this thing to confuse mankind, to create some kind of a smokescreen. But let's face it, which scientist is not an evidential presuppositionalist? For at the end of the day, it's the evidence that I presuppose. How do I get into a laboratory without presuppositions? So look how they try to weave these words to try to confuse me. And I said, what? I exist. I'm questioning my system. I'm looking around that is it possible this grand spectacular system can come out of pure chance? Can pure chance control order? Can totality of disorder bring about order? These are absurd statements in science. Absurd. That when you look at chance and probabilities, it is completely controlled within a control system. There is no such thing as totality of chance outside of a control system. It's inconceivable. It's like saying there was so much randomness, it suddenly formed a computer which formed an operating system which became Microsoft Windows. That's absurd. Absurd. Now imagine trying to project these kinds of postulates forward in science. People think you're crazy. So I said, wait a minute, there's a root here that as much as there are chances and probabilities of things can happen, and probabilities are there, and Allah has allowed me in this spectacular universe to counter every coin with a counter coin, which is what life is so beautiful about. But no one ever said that there is never an argument for something, for there's no consistency to something. Because if there was no consistency to anything, then science should not exist. Because science needs to stand on a consistent foundation too, for it to project any solutions and any answers. And the more I got into it, the more I realized, wait a minute, I'm being duped into this what we call rhetorical talk. It's rhetoric. It's all rhetoric, you get it? It's not real, it's rhetoric. It's just made up stories to confuse us. And I challenged it in my university. I used to sit with my professors and challenge, what do you mean by this word? Well, I said, you're violating science. You say nature decides. I said, how does it decide? Is it intelligent? What do you mean by it taking this position and not that position? Why is evolution so progressive? Oh, because if it wasn't, it would cease to exist. Why is the necessity to exist so important? Well, that's just the way it works. I said, well, have you wondered why is the way it works? Or are we supposed to just throw our hands in the air and say, well, that's it? So in other words, if you tell me that don't lie, and I say, why not? You say, well, that's the way it works. And that's it? That's my answer? In other words, I should be so myopic in all my movements, my ethical movements should just be a nose, strike away, that's it? Nothing long-term that I should worry about? I said, well, you may have an argument, but to me, that's a very foolish, childish argument. I'm not willing to accept that as a human being. I think we're far too intelligent for such conversations. And the more I went into it, the more I started looking. So now let me just conclude on this real fast before we go to the Q&A session. So what about evolution? Was Adam evolved? Because this is a classic question we have. Because we've got what we call the neo-Darwinian theories of evolution. As you know, Darwin was a believer in God. And the origin of species that he wrote about, there were so many conjectures. If you study them, there were over 270 hypothetical ifs in his theory. If this was, this would be. If this is, this would be. This was how Darwin was originally presenting the Darwinian theories. Now, what Darwin brought when he observed the finches and, in the Galapagos Islands and so on, it's a very valid question. Did we evolve? And I think scientifically, it's a very valid question. It should be asked that way. Because science, by definition, is a methodology to understand the reality based on the system, and I'm going to repeat it, based on the system of cause and effect. Science is an observation based on a system of cause and effect. That's it. It's that simple. Everything we study in science is either an effect and we study the cause, or we understand the cause and we create the effect. That's what science is about. It's a methodology. That's it. And we try to purify the methodology such that we know when to create the effect when we want it, because we know how it works. Just like when a guy builds an aircraft, there are 1,000 ways to put an aircraft, but when that 747 is going to carry 300-400 people, it's most probably going to reach its destination, because the ones who built it tested all the possibilities and made sure any potential danger to that flight was removed from its parameters, which then increased the safety record of the aircraft. You agree? It's a methodology. It's a scientific approach. That's all it's about. So it's a system of cause and effect. And in science, in a pure form of science, I am an effect. What caused me? Did I come from a predecessor? I do know I have parents. Did my parents have parents who had parents who had parents? But who were those parents that came? That's the question. So in science, to go backward in this methodology, and therefore to use this term evolution, is not wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. Micro or macro, when we look at all the levels of evolution, all of them have some credibility to it, and they are a necessary part of science. So let's not collectively, holistically take this whole thing and throw it out the window. It says, no, this has nothing to do with me because I'm a Muslim. This is not proper approach to science. Proper approach to science is to say, I see the term, I recognize it, I see its function, I see its limitations, I accept it with its understanding of limitations. Otherwise, I'm not generically and unanimously accepting nor rejecting. That is the proper way of observing what science is all about. I hope you understand that. So when we talk about generic terms, does Islam accept evolution? Haram or halal? Well, there is no haram or halal. To say that evolution is the mother of all, and to philosophically take a leap of faith to say, therefore there is no God, and therefore there is no need for a God because evolution is managing all of that, that to me is blind statement. That's not science. That to me is a religion. That's the definition. What is a religion? Religion is an ideology that translates into a way of life. It's a way of life that's ideologically tracked. And when I reject God, that's my religion. When I accept half a God, that's my religion. When I consider science to be my pathway, that's my religion. So religion by definition is a way of life with a certain set of scruples, that even an atheist has scruples. They have methods by which they derive their laws. So religion in principle means anybody who's intelligent and capable of articulating an idea has to have a religion. In other words, there's no human being other than a vegetable mentally who does not have a religion. That's my definition. Science is a method. Is evolution the mother of all? Absurd. Evolution is a system. That even when you have collisions, a collision is a system. When gases collide, which brings about life, it's a system. There are mechanical systems. Where did these gases come from? And gases cannot function without an environment. And what about the mathematical systems? We know by the laws of probability, when something has a probability chance, it's a product, always a product. So if it's 1 in a million, and there's another product that can happen 1 in a million, then these two must be multiplied. 1 in a million times 1 in a million. Always the case. It's a mathematical rule. No one can violate that. Now, when you multiply these probabilities by logical analysis, the numbers get smaller. So regression is part of pure chance in probabilities, meaning 1 in a million divided by 1 in a million, it's now 1 in 10 to the 12, because now the 6 zeros and the 6 zeros just got doubled. So what do you do then? The numbers get smaller. Oh, that means that pure chance is regressive, not progressive. So we've got progressive systems, we've got ideologies, we've got faith, we've got morality. These are not products of pure mechanical sciences. So no one in his proper mind can dare say that evolution as a methodology of replication and bringing about this complex multicellular human being like you and I is the only reason for our existence. It's so childish, so myopic, with due respect to those who believe in it. It is so childish, I can't believe they're getting away with it in academia. Honestly, I cannot believe it. I only think the reason they're doing this is because they don't want to get in there, because they're afraid of it. And partly I don't blame them, because people of religion who have fabricated religions, who have taken this argument of science when they were in power, they punished scientists. They used to burn them by the stakes. And they used to castigate them and destroy them and saying, you're playing with God. So yes, if science has come back with a vengeance in saying, keep religion out of science, partly I don't blame them. But historically, when the Muslims, like Ibn Sina, if you take Al-Khwarizmi, you take Jabir ibn Hayyan, these are famous fathers of science of modernity, that if Al-Khwarizmi, he's the one who came up with the idea of algorithms. All of computer worlds are algorithms, zeros and ones, constant algorithms. This is all what was established by Al-Khwarizmi. These people, when they were writing this, every other sentence had God in it. Subhanallah, look at this. They're talking about God. Take Ibn Sina, he discovered many things in science, including circulation. If you study these people, you'll find that they were always talking about Allah. How could they? Because that's the way it should be. But in the modern world today, where those who want to go into pure science and they want to negate God, where the atheistic movement is now in full force around the universities, to me, I find it is a violation of free thinking. For if you're going to limit me to question even the existence of God as a scientist, then you are a slave owner, because you have limited my capacity to question. And why should I get fired if I'm a teacher who is ever going to talk about creation and God and an intelligent designer? Why should I get fired? To me, that's a conspiracy. That to me is politics. That's not real science. Real science is give me the opportunity. Quran even says, قُلْ هَاتُوا بُرْهَانَكُمْ إِن كُنْتُمْ صَادِقِينَ. Say to them, bring your proof if you're truthful. Don't condemn me and damn me because I want to bring God into the picture. This is absurd. So I'm just letting you understand that there is a conspiracy out there. No doubt conspiracy. And part of the conspiracy spills into even very honest people. And part of the conspiracy is that those who have pretended to hold the rope of God's religion are abusing people and misusing it, which leads to greater atheism and agnosticism. Take a person like, for example, I'll give you a simple example. The ex-governor, as you know, Jesse Ventura, the ex-governor of Minnesota. Jesse Ventura is really a pragmatist, okay, an ex-Marine who's really seeing a lot of the wrong things that are being done in the government and in the justice system of people. He publicly states, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God, I'm against religion. To me, it kills it, because as altruistic as he is, as much as he strives to uncover the truth, he kills it when he says, I don't want religion. Now why? Because he's also a victim of having seen abuse and misuse of religion, which has led him to shut off on religion. I don't blame such people sometimes. But it's our obligation to articulate it well and to expose it to them. I've had many an atheist I sit down with, and they ask me questions, and the minute I give them answers, they said, oh, I thought it was different. Oh, I thought it was like this. I said, you're comparing your religion on the basis of Christian beliefs in God. I said, please don't apply Christian ideologies to all of theistic arguments. That's just one argument. Apply a universal argument. I remember in my first debate, there was a woman who came. She said, I was a Christian. I became an atheist. But I always argued from the Christian God argument, and hence I was an atheist. But after this debate, I am going to reconsider God because I see a whole new perspective on God. See? That's the difference. Okay? And let me conclude finally, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows us, how could Adam come into this picture? Let me show you a basic premise argument. That as much as science is limited to cause and effect, we do agree that that initial cause, no science has been able to answer. Today, there is no science in the world that can answer the origin of life. No scientist in the world knows the origin of life. There are suggestions that it came from another planet. I said, I don't care if it came from the other side of the universe. Who cares where it came from? The question is, was it always there, or did it come out of nothing? That's the question. The human mind, notice my range in my mind is what? All of us. 0, infinity. 0, infinity. You cannot stop this. We have our two extreme boundaries, 0, infinity. That's it. And you know, in science, I remember whenever I used to study even calculus, I used to always study about this infinity. You know, Isaac Newton actually came up with the system of calculus, which is natural mathematics, which actually talks the language of the universe. And Einstein had a problem because you cannot divide a number by 0. That's an illegal function. So he used to cheat and come up with an answer. So people said, oh, your science is flawed because you're cheating. So there was a French mathematician who came up with the answer and says it's limits. Don't divide it by 0, but get to 0 infinitely. As x approaches whatever, which makes it infinitely 0. It approaches 0, but it's never 0, and that's legal. It's called limits. I said, but why do I need limits? He says, well, actually, the true language of science is infinity. I said, subhanallah, I see that now. It like clicked, like a puzzle that fell into its head. Said, wow, there it is. Subhanallah. Actually, the entire world of science is driven by infinity. Without infinity, nothing makes sense. And then I started scratching my head. I said, but you know, as important as this entity is, it's not tangible. I can't touch it. I can't measure it. I can talk about it. I can apply things towards it, but I can never feel it. Something's always approaching infinity, but never becomes infinite. Because the minute it becomes infinite, you can't talk about it. Wow. And you know, I don't want to take a blind leap of faith, because it's not. But the first thing that came to my mind, I said, this infinity in reality is Allah. Everything is approaching in infinity. And the more I studied, I noticed there's nothing in the universe, as soon as it comes out of 0, is never stopping but approaching infinity. And philosophically I said, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. I see it. I see physical entities approaching Allah forever. Wow. And it's the language of Allah that gives credence to everything. But I can never explain it. So when people ask me, give me this tangible God. If you don't have a tangible God, you're talking nonsense in your religion. I said, give me the tangible infinity, because if you're not, you're talking nonsense in science. And they back off. I said, give it to me. I want to see it. Then don't talk about it. Don't give me 13 dimensions. You can't even experiment with it. What is this conjectural science you're talking about? They said, no, that's derivative. I said, thank you, I'm deriving too. I am an evidential presuppositionalist. I am existing. I see this fantastic universe. I'm studying science. I'm seeing its incredible order. Should I not ask the question of a maker? Should I not even think about intelligence? What are you talking about? If I, as an intelligent being, dares to go on the altar of intelligence to question the integrity of my own existence, how can I not question the integrity of my maker? And they back off. And finally, I'll tell you, final point. You see, when you study the DNA, the proof of intelligence is in the DNA. Because one of the proofs of intelligence is language. See, we're intelligent beings. In fact, when they did studies on monkeys and apes, they found out how intelligent are the apes? How did we come from them? What's that missing link between us? And you find that language was a critical thing. They were trying to teach these apes, to understand language, because language was a critical point of the sign of intelligence. Now, they do have language, by the way. Even birds have language. We don't have arguments with them. But we do know that's a sign of intelligence, because one of the conditions of intelligence is language. And language is composed of encode, decode. Like I'm right now encoding. As I'm speaking to you, I'm encoding. I'm encoding words. I'm encoding gestures. I'm encoding ideas to you. And you're listening to it and you're decoding instantaneously. So we are intelligently conversing, because there's encode, decode, encode, decode. That's what life is about. I hope you understand that. DNA is precisely that. It's an encode, which then gets decoded. Intelligence. Wow. Can we deny it? No. So I hope you understand that, okay? Final point, and I promise you this is the end of the final point, is that when we say, where did Adam come into this picture? The origin can never come on its own. Thus Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is showing us that when He interjects and brings in other beings in between this flow, it's just as good as the first one. And that's the answer. By the way, when we study backwards, there's this theory called the mitochondrial Eve. I don't know if you've studied this. All human beings' mitochondria, which is the power cell of the human body, which gives us the energy to do what we're doing, the mitochondria is completely matrilineal in its genetic components. We all inherited from our mothers. All of us inherited from our mothers. So it's very easy to now remove the male species and just keep the female. And you find that they've done studies in mitochondrial Eve that the human race all aims towards one woman in Africa. Now, of course, they try to debunk it, try to crash it, they try to make it silly. Doesn't matter. Let's ask that question. Could we have evolved from a set of monkeys due to some mutation? Then where are these half-creature monkeys, half-humans? Oh, no, you can't ask questions like this. See, evolution is very protracted, long-term. I said, okay, I'm ready to listen. I got all my life. Show it to me. Oh, but it is a musically, we can't. It's actually just the way it evolved. I said, look, I am genetically very different in my set of chromosomes from an ape. And even with PCR, you're able to replicate and accelerate movements forward and backwards. Where is this answer? So there are too many chunks of voids and, unanswerable questions. Science, hopefully in the future, will try to answer more and more. But there is clear evidence that even people like Brian Greene is one of the world-renowned cosmologists at Columbia University. He said there is clear evidence that as time progresses, science will be less viable, not more viable. Because the dark matter, the expansion of the universe is going to cause such dark matter that we will be less visible to be able to see science than the way we have today. So here's a scientist who's agreeing that as time progresses, we will have less knowledge. That's interesting. People say, no, science can answer everything. No, it cannot. It's a mechanical system. The answering of the question is the ethical question, not the mechanical question, which is what we're going to discuss. Sallallahu alaihi Muhammad wa Muhammad.